From a delusional, disgraced city council member in Los Angeles to a deceitful governor in Florida, what is going on with the folks elected by the people to represent and serve the people? We'll ask our experts coming up next.
Live from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
You have probably already heard about what's going on with the Los Angeles City Council. It's made national news, even international news. 3 city council members now, 1 former city council member and 1 former labor leader caught on an audio tape, scheming, plotting, planning on how they could eviscerate Black political power by diluting districts that were being drawn in our 10-year redistricting process. These council members and labor leader were trying to decide how they could cut up the district. There could be more Latino power in our city council and less representation by African Americans. And they even went further than that. It wasn't just scheming and plotting on how to draw districts. It was also these incredibly horrific racial slurs that were heard on this tape. And once that tape was leaked, we have been dealing with the fallout every day in the city of Los Angeles. And as I said, this has become a national story. The city council president, then city council president, who was caught on that tape, Nuri Martinez, was forced to first step down as city council president, and then she resigned from the city council altogether. Labor leader Ron Herrera was also forced by the national labor movement to step down from his position as the president of the Los Angeles County Federation. There are 2, though, city council members who are on that tape who are digging in, who are refusing to resign, despite the fact that the president of the United States, Joe Biden, as well as every member who is seated on that city council, have called for their resignations. We've heard calls from the U.S. Senator Alex Padilla, from the Congressional Latino Caucus, and just about every Democratic leader in the city of Los Angeles and the state of California. But City Council member Kevin De Leon, who has 2 more years left on his term, must have decided to hire some kind of crisis manager, because he, rather than resigning, he's going on television, giving interviews, telling television hosts that he is not going to resign. He says he's apologized. He's written letters of apologies to his constituents. He's written letters of apology to his fellow council members. He's made these apologies over and over again on television, but that's not enough. An apology is not what the city council has requested. It's not what the people of Los Angeles are demanding. The real issue here is, how can someone who has now been stripped of all of his committee assignments by the new Los Angeles City Council president, Paul Krikorian, someone whose fellow council members say they will not work with him, someone who has lost the trust of everyone in the city of Los Angeles, or at least everyone that's been vocal about this issue, how can they remain in a position where they have to show up at city council meetings that happen 3 times a week, where they still get to maintain their staff and their salary, and they still have an opportunity to cast votes on important issues, from homelessness to crime to the allocation of resources? What we heard on that despicable audio tape was an anti-Blackness sentiment that many of us believe is pervasive in our city government. And just because Nuri Martinez, the former president of the council, resigned, that doesn't mean that that sentiment just evaporated, that it just magically went away. No, there's work to be done. There's work to be done to unpack why we have elected officials who have determined that somehow Black folks in the city of Los Angeles are less deserving of resources, less deserving of support by their elected officials. And there's a lot of talk about, we got to move towards healing. We've got to heal the Black Latino coalition. We can't allow this audio tape to create fissures. Well, the reality is the fissures are already there. The Band-Aid was just ripped off, and we can't ignore what happened. We must. It's imperative that we get to the root of this problem. And we can only do that once these two members of the city council, Gil Cedillo and Kevin De Leon, are gone. They cannot be allowed to maintain their positions and to continue to sit on that city council unless, well, I should say they can't remain if we are, as a city, to ever start the conversation about healing. So as we're in the midst of this fallout, as we're watching everything that's happening around this audio tape and the leaking of this audio tape, the city council had a big decision to make. They had to elect a new city council president because, as I said, Nuri Martinez, who has served as president for the last couple of years, had to step down. So the city council came together, not in a public meeting, because all of the public meetings have had so many protesters show up, they haven't been able to even conduct a meeting. They conducted an online meeting. And at that online meeting just this week, they elected Paul Krikorian. Paul Krikorian is a moderate, as he describes himself, Democrat who represents the San Fernando Valley, which is a suburb outside of Los Angeles. And he won by a 10-0 vote. Now, many of us, and I'm one of them, immediately took to Twitter to really denounce the election of Paul Krikorian. Not because I have anything against him personally. He's a lawyer. He's had what looks like to be a pretty respectable career as a lawyer. But I looked at his website. Paul Krikorian did not have not a single solitary African-American or a person who appeared to be African-American on his staff. Now, we all know that representation matters. And if you are going to be the president of the Los Angeles City Council, particularly in this moment when we are dealing with all of this racial strife, wouldn't it make sense to elect someone who has demonstrated that they understand the concept of inclusiveness, that they have a staff that represents all of Los Angeles? Now, Paul Krikorian went on KBLA Talk 1580 the first day that he was elected president, and my colleague and host and owner of the radio station, Tavis Smiley, asked him about the lack of African Americans on his staff. And he acknowledged that at this moment, the moment when he's elected as president, he did not. He said there was some offer out, or he was making an offer, or that, maybe someone African American was going to be coming onto his staff. But should you have to be outed? Should the people of Los Angeles had to have gone to your website to figure out that you don't have any Black staff members to cause you to go out and find one? Is it really the best decision in this moment of racial strife to have someone like Paul, who by his own website doesn't seem to have the kind of sensitivity to the issues that are plaguing our city at this time? And we know that these issues are far bigger than, again, what happened in that meeting and what's happening at the city council. They have wide-reaching implications for the African-American community right here in Los Angeles and nationally. This anti-Blackness, this sentiment, again, not going away because we have new council members, not going away because we have a new council president. We've got to deal with it. And we know this country doesn't like grappling with issues of race. But when it's thrown in your face in the way that this audio tape was, we don't have a choice. We absolutely positively must do the hard work of addressing those sentiments, because everything in the city of Los Angeles is at stake. How we spend our money on homelessness, how we allocate resources for our police department, how we build jobs in this city, all at stake. And what we do know is that protesters, including Black Lives Matter's grassroots, have been camping out outside of Kevin De Leon's house. They've set up an encampment to demand that he resign. And those protesters, we know, we've seen them. We've seen how they operate after George Floyd. They are resolute. And they have basically said they are not going to leave that encampment until they get that resignation. Joining me, we're getting her on the air, is my colleague and friend Dominique DePrima. She's a host over at KBLA Talk 1580. She does the morning show, the drive-in show, First Things First with Dominique DePrima. And she was at that encampment yesterday. And I was watching your Instagram page and watching as you were posting. And it looked like there was this huge crowd. You described it as organized. So tell us what was happening at that encampment, Dominique.
It was very organized. It's Black Lives Matter, LA Community Action Network. There's all kinds of different actual community-based organizations under the leadership of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. What we saw at the encampment was people just posted up down the street from the home of Council Member Kevin De Leon demanding his resignation. But they've got food, they have coffee, they've got a DJ, there are tents set up, the tents that people are sleeping in for the encampment, but also tents, canopies, covering the food, the supplies, the water. There were people driving by throughout the time that I was there, dropping off supplies. Somebody came from the Krispy Kreme in South LA and dropped off a whole bunch of donuts. You have neighbors that were donating ice and coolers and all kinds of things. People that live in that community saying, you know what, we understand why you're here, which is pretty remarkable. Most people don't want folks just camping out on their block. But
Right.
the neighbors, many of them have put up signs saying Kevin De Leon must resign. It was very remarkable. Orderly kind of protest, stay off the streets so the people can pass through, no cussing allowed, but very determined nonetheless.
So Dominique, tell us, we know this is the Eagle Rock community, so it's kind of a LA suburb of sorts, but this is the district that he lives in, Kevin De Leon, and that he represents. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually the block where his home is. Initially, the encampment was set up right in front of Kevin De Leon's house, but he called the police, and the police have said that the protesters must remain 300 feet from his residence. That's a new city council ordinance that was passed not too long ago, you may remember, Areva, and now it was getting difficult for the encampment to stay because they couldn't stay in front of his house. One of the residents on that street has allowed the protesters to actually utilize her front yard. The residents are letting folks use their electricity. And so the neighborhood is compliant. And I think that's really important here, because when you're talking about pushing a city council member to resign, now his constituents are in collaboration. And what was also interesting is you saw Black, of course, but there were Asian Americans, there were lots of Latinos, there were white allies. I mean, it was quite a mix of people that were protesting and camping out in front of the council member or down the street from the council member's home.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here in amazement because he probably voted for that ordinance that you couldn't be outside of, someone's house. He calls the police, so he's using the city resources to move the protesters away from his doorstep. But then his neighbor says, okay, you can't be in front of his house. Come on down the street. I'll let you use my property. That is a testament to how intense the city is, the residents of our city and his constituents are about him resigning. So if you know Dominique, you've seen him, he's been on TV, he's doing his kind of media circuit. I assume he's hired some high, and they're saying, well, issue an apology to everyone, go on TV and, act contrite, say you're sorry, and say the city has business to take care of. Is he just delusional? Does he not recognize that he is not wanted, he's not trusted, and there's not a vote that he can take on any issue, homelessness, crime, jobs, that anyone would feel like he, is legitimate, that it's a legitimate vote? Is he missing something in this equation?
I think he's missing the seriousness of it. I think he is delusional, but not delusional, because as you know, Areva, the city council does not have a mechanism to remove him at this time because he doesn't have a felony, at least not yet. Indictment, they can't remove him. And so the only way to actually remove him is through a recall election, which the voters of his district have already filed and are moving forward with. But of course, that will take months, even longer. So he needs to resign. I think he is delusional in the fact that he thinks he can just get away with this, keep going, that it'll blow over. It's not going to blow over. Councilmember Bonin released a scathing reply to De Leon's interview where he said that, he was not going to step down, but he was willing to do the work. And where he said he made a flippant remark when he compared Bonin's young African-American son to a designer handbag. And clearly Bonin doesn't think he gets the gravity of it. I don't think he does either. If you notice the story about this black developer of a project, I think it's a $1.6 billion project in De Leon's district, saying we won't work with him. We don't want to work with him. Now that we know he's a racist, we think he may have been slow walking our project all along. Of course, the council member's office is denying that. But if you think about those kinds of dynamics, yes, we can't make you step down, but we can block you at every turn. And it's ridiculous for him to be holding up the business of the city when it's all about his personal problems. His personal problem with racism, homophobia, sexism, anti-Indigenousness, anti-Semitism, and on it goes. And for him to act like he was just an observer is ridiculous. He was actively participating in the conversation and in the scheming to minimize black political power.
Yeah, that's the part that really gets me. And I'm starting to hear, Dominique, and it's really bothering me, some apologists for Kevin De Leon. Someone I consider a friend and a colleague said something to me yesterday about, well, is it really necessary that he steps down? And aren't you concerned about the private nature of this phone call and people being, outed or held accountable when they talk, in an area where they have some expectation of privacy, and then that, audio is leaked. And as a lawyer, of course, I have concerns about people's rights to privacy and about any kind of activity that might be criminal. But as a Black woman, I have a lot more issues with the anti-Blackness that was revealed on that tape, and which is pervasive. And that gets me to my next point I want to ask you about. So you've said the council has very limited power. We know the charter doesn't allow them to remove Kevin De Leon or Gil Cedillo. We should talk about him too. But we know the council can make another council member's life very miserable. The new president, Paul Krikorian, was on our station, KBLA Talk 1580, on the day that he was elected 10-0. And, I've been tweeting about this. Not a Black person on that man's website, not a Black employee on his staff. How he got 10 votes, including from our 2 African-American council members, is troubling to me. I do not understand that. If you're going to vote for him, before we have this vote, because there's no reason to take the vote in a week. Mitch O'Farrell could have sat there for a couple of more weeks. You need to go hire some Black folks. You need to do something to demonstrate that you understand what inclusivity looks like, what representation means. But there was this rushed vote in 1 week, so Paul gets the votes. So Tavis Smiley, he's on Tavis's show, asked him about, are you just going to continue conducting business as usual and letting Kevin and Gil show up to work? And Paul's remark was, well, we can't let them hold up the business of the city. Kevin has 2 years left. We have to move forward. And Tavis pushed back on that. He says, well, wait a minute. We have these examples from the civil rights movement. There's something called peaceful, resistance. And that's what King and civil rights leaders did. They resisted. And yes, it may be uncomfortable, but it's equally uncomfortable for us as African Americans to know, and I would hope for the whole city to know, that this racist is sitting on that council and can vote. So what do you think about Paul's position on this?
No, I agree with Tavis Smiley and you and all of the protesters who are in front of Kevin De Leon's house. And the reason they're not in front of Cedillo's house is he's already been voted out by the public. So he'll be gone by December, even though we'd like him to be gone sooner. But I think you have a great point. There's no reason why they have to show up. The city council members could avoid a quorum, which means, they don't show up to the meeting, then there is no meeting. What they've said is they'll walk out if De Leon and Cedillo are there, but they haven't committed to stopping down the process. And I think they should. I get that you've stripped him of his committee assignments. I get that you're trying to make his life miserable in ways that don't impede on your ability to do your job. And I get that there is business of the city that needs to be done. That's why you shut everything down and get these guys out, because how can you even have them around? I mean, we know they can't vote on anything because it's of the impact on policy. And that's the part I think we're not talking enough about, Areva, is, look, they're racist. Okay, we know there's probably racists on every city council. We just don't know who they are. But we're talking about potentially illegal activities, and activities that also impact the resources and policies that affect Black, Latino, Indigenous, LGBTQ plus folks. How do they vote? How did those votes in the past impact the allocation of resources and policies? You can't have any more of that. You can't allow more of that to happen going forward. And we're not just talking about, oh, you hurt my feelings, you as an individual racism. You were trying to gerrymander the maps to take away Black political power. You were trying to move massive resources and valuable assets out of Black districts. That is illegal and problematic. So it's not just about, oh, are you a bad person? It's about, have you done illegal activity? Whether or not you've been, indicted or whatever is not even the point. You're not fit to be an LA City Councilman. I think that's what Cedillo and De Leon are not getting. And I think maybe that's what the City Council's not getting. Otherwise, they would take more extreme measures to shut them out. I agree the vote on City Council President may have been premature. I think they all decided Krikorian was a safe option because he's been on the council a long time and he's not controversial. He's somewhat of a centrist. And I assume they're going to have another vote, Areva, when the new council is seated in January, when we could have as many as 5 new council members. And they'll probably vote in a person of color because most of the new council members are quite progressive, more progressive than the current body.
I've heard that, Dominique, and I sure hope that's true, because when I look at all of these exposés on Krikorian and his life and his family, and he doesn't look like a guy that's about to move over in 2 months to me. He looks like someone who is, putting his stake in the ground, and he plans to be there. He's out in 2 years himself. He said something else that was troubling to me in that interview. He said, well, Tavis asked him, Mike Feuer, our city attorney, has said that those maps are illegitimate and they need to be redrawn. He says, well, I don't know. That might be disruptive. Let's take a look at it and maybe we'll redraw them before the next election. That's troubling to me.
Yeah, that's a good observation, because I had Pastor Eddie Anderson on my radio show yesterday morning, and he was on the redistricting commission for the LA City Council. And he told me after they spent a whole year carefully drawing these maps, then Nury Martinez came in and basically just threw them away, seated a new commission that was compliant with her, handed them a map to rubber stamp, and that's the map we have now. That also sounds illegal. If not illegal, highly problematic. And you may be right. I mean, we've all kind of said, well, they'll get a new city council president in January, but I personally don't know the procedure for removing a council president if they don't want to step down.
It's votes.
I think they'll have the votes to vote him out, but wouldn't he have to call the vote?
Yes, there'd have to be a call for the vote, and I don't know if he wouldn't have the votes, because that's a powerful position. You get to give out.
I don't think he'd have the votes, not with the new people coming in. But I don't know that it can go on the council agenda without the council president's approval, even though Krikorian has said.
But you've already assumed, Dominique, that some of those races that are very tight, like that Baden district, that the progressive in that race is going to win. And that's not necessarily the case. We could end up with a very divided council between moderates and progressives. And that progressive candidate of color that you're thinking about, or whoever that is, wouldn't have the votes. That's what we just saw with Curran Price. He didn't have the votes. So it's a risky strategy. I mean, we don't know what will happen with it, but I do understand that was kind of the thinking. But again, we don't need status quo, and we don't need safe. So this notion that we wanted a safe candidate, that bothers me as well. We need disruption. That city council has to be upended. The racist anti-Blackness sentiment, it didn't walk out the door with Nury Martinez. The ghost of Nury is in that city council. And I don't know where Paul Krikorian is on these issues, but I don't like the fact that I talked to Eddie Anderson on my show as well. I don't like the fact that Pastor Anderson is saying the maps were drawn based on this scheme of dividing the Black community or eviscerating our power. And he says, well, maybe we'll keep it because it's going to be too much work to redo it. Well, do the work. We don't care if it's a lot of work. That's what you need to do. Do the work. So this notion of a safe choice, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I also didn't buy the idea that this is just like a unifying choice. Unifying for who? I agree with you. I don't know why they had to rush into it. I did say on my show that I thought it would make sense to have a Black council president right now, especially given the fact that Mike Bonin has made it abundantly clear that he didn't want the job. Why rush into it? You're right. We may be stuck with Krikorian for a long time. Maybe he'll do a great job, but I myself would prefer a progressive to a centrist. And I think maybe more time should have been taken unintended consequences abound. I think it's more than the ghost of Nuri Martinez, Areva. The imprint is on the policies and the budget allocations of Nuri, of Gil Cedillo, of Kevin De Leon, and it is operational right now in the city of Los Angeles, those lines that were drawn. And basically, we can conclude that those lines are coming out of that meeting that we heard on tape. Because if they scrap the work of the commission and put in their own map, where did that map come from? It came from that meeting, more or less, and probably some other meetings like it. So that's extremely problematic. The good news is our state attorney general is investigating, and it may be out of the city council's hands whether or not they redraw those maps.
Great point. Thank you so much for that, because that gives us some hope. I was calling on that. I know you were calling on it, so we're glad to see that Bonta has stepped up. There's also been complaints made to the Justice Department, the Department of Justice, because if there was criminal conduct, then the folks who were engaged in it need to be held accountable. And if that means criminal indictments, that means criminal indictments. This story, we're going to stay on it. Dominique, thank you so much for jumping off of your show after 3 hours of being on the air since 6 this morning and joining me, just giving us some perspective about what's happening. I love when we can tell stories of peaceful protest because, you know, mainstream media loves a good car fire or building fire or trash can fire whenever there's protest. So thank you for sharing that the protesters are out and it's kumbaya with the neighbors, and there's lots of support and lots of coalition and community amongst all of the residents or all of the ethnicities that are represented in the city of Los Angeles. We'll be talking about this, my friend. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to switch gears now. We're talking about what's happening locally in Los Angeles, which is blown up into this big national story. But there's another national story that we've been following, and that is we go from the disgraced council member to the deceitful governor, the governor of Florida, Rick DeSantis, who is up to another one of his political stunts, this time arresting folks for voting in the 2020 election after government officials told them that they could vote. Cliff Albright is with me this morning. He's the co-founder of Black Voters Matter, and we're going to talk about what's happening around voting in Florida and all over the country. Good morning, Cliff.
Hey, good morning, Areva. How you doing today?
I'm well. What's going on in Florida, Cliff? You're in jail. A government official comes in with a form and says, hey, you know, they passed this new law, so you felons can vote now. All you got to do is fill out this form and sign your name, and you can get your voter registration card. They do it. And then a couple of years later, somebody's knocking on the door, or some of these guys weren't even allowed to get out of jail. They were told while in jail, guess what? There's a new warrant for your arrest because you voted in that 2020 election. Political stunt, or what is DeSantis doing?
Well, you know, white supremacy go to white supremacists, right? That's what's going on in Florida. I mean, it's literally not only is it a disgrace, it's possibly legally even entrapment, right? Because the folks that came to get many of these people registered were actually state officials. And on top of that, it was state officials that have the obligation to let people know when they are able to actually get their rights restored. We even have to go back a step further, right? Because keep in mind that when Amendment 4 was passed in Florida, that was the amendment to statewide ballot initiative, which won overwhelmingly over 60% of the vote to be able to restore voting rights. The assumptive language was that people would just be able to get their rights restored, right? That they wouldn't have to jump through hoops. DeSantis and his lackeys in the state legislature then went back and passed legislation that would basically require them to be done not only serving time, but with fines and fees and all this other stuff. So that was setting the stage for it. Then you get folks that are being released that are then entrapped and told by state officials that they can register to vote. And then 2 years later, you see the folks coming, getting knocks on the door. I mean, some of the videos, I'm sure you've seen in Areva, the videos of these folks as the police were coming to arrest them, and they are absolutely bewildered. They have no understanding of why it is. All I did was vote. All I did was what you all told me I could do. All I did was try to do what returning citizens and people who are trying to be actively involved do. And for that, I'm being arrested literally in my front lawn. It's just a disgrace and possibly illegal.
Yeah, in addition to the people who are so bewildered, as you said, I've also heard some of the body cam from the officers themselves saying, like, I've never had to arrest anyone for anything like this. Is this really a crime? I mean, the police officers feeling bad for having to go out and issue those arrest warrants and, hauling people into jail for voting. I mean, they're not even aware of it. And let's talk about race, Cliff. It's about 19 folks who have been identified in the reports who had previous felons who are now facing new felonies for voting in the 2020 elections. 12, we are told, are Democrats, but 13 of the 19, overwhelming majority, are African American.
Yeah.
Is this racial profiling, racial targeting at its worst?
Yeah, no doubt. And it's both racial and partisan, but most clearly that it's racial, right? Because keep in mind that you have a couple of white MAGA voters who knowingly, and I'm gonna come back to this knowingly piece, knowingly voted twice, right? The only examples, and it's not just Florida, you can look at Florida, you can look at North Carolina, you can look at other states. The only real examples of voter fraud that have been exposed in the past couple of years have all been from MAGA voters, have been from white MAGA voters who have intentionally gone out and cast multiple ballots, who cast ballots for people that they knew were dead. Those are the only examples that we've seen. And yet in Florida, where you have two white MAGA people that did that, they get off with like a slap on the wrist. I think they got like community service or something like that for knowingly committing fraud. But then you have these folks who were literally entrapped and they're facing a felony and multiple years in prison. Yes, it is clearly racial, the same way that DeSantis's entire establishment of his voting police was racial, and the same way that his maps, and I say his maps because he did something that was unprecedented in terms of a governor doing his own gerrymandering in the state, his maps were racial in the way that they diluted the Black vote, particularly in places like Jacksonville, which is where I'm actually going to be tomorrow. I'm gonna go say hi to good old DeSantis and let him know what we think.
Give him a bro, a fist bump or something.
Right.
But it's all this, we're not making fun of it. We're not laughing because this is a very serious issue. But Cliff, do you think this is all about trying to intimidate Black voters? They saw the power of the Black vote, they being Republicans in 2020. They know how energized the Democratic base is around the issue of the overturning of Roe v. Wade, over the refusal of the Republicans to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, the George Floyd Policing Act. They know where the energy is. So is this all done to just, make Black folks afraid? Like, oh my God, I could be like that guy and end up with a felony.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm so glad you asked that question because that's a critical point that I raise often with all these forms of voter suppression, right? You've got a double impact. The first impact is on who it is whose vote has actually been suppressed, and whether that's a community that's been suppressed by the gerrymandering, or whether it's a case like this where you've got 19 and 20 individuals who have been targeted. And you've got the direct impact, or if it's the person who's not able to register or the person who's not able to vote by mail, you've got the direct impact on the voter whose vote has been suppressed, right? That's one impact. But the other piece is what you just raised. It is the overall intimidation. It is the overall message that's sent that your vote doesn't matter. It's the overall message being sent that if you're a returning citizen, even if you've been out for years and maybe had your rights restored for years, it leaves this cloud over everybody that says, you know what, if they did it to them, they can do it to me, right? If they're putting them in jail, they can do it to me. If this person got fired from their job, it could happen to me. It's always been the case that even go back to Selma, right? The people that got beat up on the bridge, the message wasn't just that they were suppressing those individual votes. It was the message to everybody that you best not be involved in a march like this or dare to march down to the courthouse and try to get your voting rights. So it's always been a matter of directly suppressing individual votes, but more importantly, of sending a message of fear and intimidation that they hope is going to go all throughout our voting population. That's why we at Black Voters Matter on our bus tour that we're doing right now with the Blackest Bus in America, the theme of our tour is we won't black down. In spite of these tactics by DeSantis and others, we're not going to settle down. We're not going to quiet down. We sure as hell ain't going to lie down. We won't black down.
Thank you for bringing up the tour, because I was going to ask you about that. Cliff, what cities? Where is this bus, this Blackest Bus on the road? Where might people find it?
You're almost anywhere, right? We're going to 12 states, and we've actually got 2 buses running right now. So we're going to be in Georgia a lot. That's our home state. It's also a state where obviously you may have heard of a couple of elections that happen to be going
I
on
think
here.
I heard about
But
those little tight elections
yeah,
going on in
a little
Georgia.
something. A little something. And so, but in addition to that, there's 11 other states that we're going to. We were just in North Carolina. I was up in Michigan and Ohio just last week. Like I said, tomorrow the bus is headed to Florida. Then we're going to be going back to Texas where we were last month. And then we're going to take another route back up, going back up north. And so, yeah, we're going to 12 states. And most of these are states that have critical races going on, either critical Senate races going on or other statewide races. Like we were in Michigan, which doesn't have a Senate race, but guess what? There's a critical race going on in Michigan at the top of the ticket, as well as a referendum on abortion rights and reproductive justice. And so 12 states, and you can find us if you go to our website or if you text us, if you text We Matter to 25225, that's 25225, We Matter, one word, you can get connected to us and you get more information about where the bus will be. We even got a little map that we got on our website so that you can follow the bus on the map.
I'm so glad to hear that you are out engaging voters and engaging volunteers. Cliff, we know this issue of Florida, like you said, it's not just Florida. This is happening in a lot of states around the country in terms of who is eligible to vote. One thing about this Florida case that really bothers me, and I'm sure so many people, is the voter registration cards doesn't clearly state what the exceptions are, because there's some exceptions to that law that restored the rights of felons to vote. Like, I think if you were convicted of murder or if you were convicted of a certain kind of sexual, a crime, you can't vote, even though the law restored the votes to most other felons. And so if you're confused, obviously you can't trust your government official, right?
Yeah.
How do you find out if you are legally eligible to vote if you have a felony?
Yeah, the best thing to do is to reach out to a trusted source. We talk about credible messengers, and that's why, we work with groups that are based right there in Florida that can give people, credible information. We got folks like Desmond Meade, right, whose organization was key in even getting that amendment passed. And so, again, when people reach out to organizations that are trusted messengers, they can get that information, because you're right, you can't trust the elected officials in a lot of cases. And in some of these states, like in Alabama, you have language talking about crimes of moral turpitude, but then you have these broad definitions around, well, what is that crime of moral turpitude, right? And in some cases that means just a felony. In other cases, they were doing things going even down like possession, small scale possession of marijuana. And so yes, you need to reach out to trusted messengers in order to get those details. And what folks in Florida need to be clear about, especially Black folks in Florida, is that these state officials, unless you got a local elected official, a county official that's in the community, that is credible and trustworthy and is actually trying to expand the vote. But other than that, you got to be very careful about who it is that you're listening to. But the main message that we want to send to folks is to get the information. Don't shy away from even trying. Don't be intimidated by what we're seeing happening by DeSantis and his election police, to just be even more. And this is what we often see, that sometimes the folks that we reach out to, they become even more concerned or even more aggressive at saying, you know what, not only am I going to go vote, but now I'm going to be an activist and I'm going to reach out to other returning citizens that I know and help them to get their rights restored. So that's the main thing that we want people to be very clear about.
And we need Black voters in Florida, because Val Demings has a real shot at unseating Marco Rubio. She threw down at that debate. Yeah. She just brought the fire, and she is raising buku money. She's just been running a flawless campaign. And so she has a real shot at becoming our third Black woman elected to the U.S. Senate in the history of this country. And if she can do that from the state of Florida, that's going to be a huge, glass ceiling that she breaks. You want to say something? Because I want to ask you, I know you got to leave, but I want to ask you about Black men, because, we always talk about Black women and the Black women being the backbone of the Democratic Party. There's some messages out there that maybe you brothers aren't all in with Joe Biden. You're not all in with the Democratic Party. You're not all in on some of our candidates, even candidates that are running in Georgia. I saw Stacy, I don't know if it was, I read it in a newspaper where she was saying if black men voted for her in large numbers that she could win. Is
That's
there a
right.
problem with black men? Y'all mad about something?
Well, yeah, we mad about something, but not the things that they think that we mad about. Let me say this before I forget, though, because I'd be remiss if I didn't mention you were absolutely correct in mentioning Val Demings possibly becoming the third black woman senator ever. But think about this: in this year, in the next couple of weeks, we can actually double the number of black women senators that we've ever had in this country, right? Because in addition to Val Demings, of course, we got Sherry Beasley running in North Carolina, who's also got a really good shot. She's previously won statewide office, right? So both of these candidates are legitimate candidates, right? They are leading candidates if they get the proper amount of support, not only from the voting community and from our community, but also from the traditional Democratic establishment, from progressive funders who have not paid those two races enough attention. And I think that we know why. But to go to your question about, black men, there's been a lot of talk recently, pundits and in the media about what black men are going to do or what black men ain't going to do. But this is what we know. We've been saying this for a long time, that polls don't vote, people vote. And what we've seen in Georgia over the first 3 days, I haven't seen the numbers from yesterday. We started our early voting here in Georgia. We set a record on day one for early vote, not only passing the 2018 early vote, the last time that there was a midterm election, but even coming close. And I think they changed numbers that we surpassed the 2020 presidential numbers. We did that on day one. And so mess around on day two. And then we messed around and went back and did it again and set another record. But that's not just overall, that's overall voting. But guess what? The black numbers within that have been at all times highs, even going up to like 35% of the electorate, right? Which would be groundbreaking. But then if you break it down even further, what have black men done? Black men have surpassed their 2018 and 2020 numbers. And so all this talk about, well, black men aren't engaged and they're not motivated, we have actually been coming out and overperforming our previous turnout and overperforming some other groups in this state. And so, as you said, black women are the backbone. They are the base. They do the work. They come vote. But black men, more than any other group, have been right behind black women. And in this cycle, we are seeing that same pattern of black men overperforming everything that people don't be clear. Nobody's drinking the Kool-Aid that Kanye's selling. Nobody's falling for, the trick of putting Herschel Walker in and thinking that black men are just going to vote for him because he used to run around with the football. You asked, are we mad about something? I said, yes, we are. We are mad about conditions in this country. We're mad about the lack of Medicaid being expanded in the state of Georgia. We're mad about the gun violence. And there's a governor here who made it easier for people to walk around without a permit and carrying weapons and putting our communities in danger. We're mad about the lack of support from the state of Georgia for black businesses, right? There are a lot of reasons we have to be mad, but we're not just going to walk around mad and angry. We're turning our protests and turning it into power. And we're doing that at the polling place.
I am so glad to hear that, Cliff, because you are right. Everything you just said about those polls, they, to me, are like the DeSantis, political stunts, often put out there to intimidate people, to make them afraid, to make them say your vote doesn't matter. Why should I vote? The other guy's going to win anyhow. They did that in Los Angeles in our primary with Karen Bass, Rick Caruso. His people put out some pub before that primary saying, well, he's probably going to win over 50%. There won't even be a general election. He got his butt kicked so badly in that primary. And that is so common that so we got to be so careful that we don't fall into that sense of just lethargy because the poll says somebody's going to win. We got to keep voting. And we know these races may be tight, but as Trump was begging your state, if I could just find 11,000 more votes, so we know every vote counts. And thank you for bringing the message that black men are mad. You're mad about the right things, but you're not letting how you feel stop you from taking action because, if you take action, you can turn that madness into something that looks more like progress. So we're going to post this website, the information where folks can text you. We want to make sure people know where you are. Those 2 buses, so they can follow you, they can get out and volunteer. They can make sure that they are engaging in their own communities. You guys are doing God's work. I mean, you guys delivered Georgia for us with Reverend Warnock So now we're going to ask you to one more again. We need Stacey and we need Reverend Warnock back in the Senate. And I think y'all can do this, Cliff.
I know we can. We gonna do it again. Let's do it again, y'all.
Let's
And
do it
remember, we
again.
won't black down.
All right, Cliff, I'll be talking with you. You know, I'm going to have you back. You got to keep us posted on that too. I really appreciate you taking time. I know how busy it is for you in the last 20 days leading up to this election. Be well, my friend, out on the road. All right,
Thank
now
you.
let's talk to Rosebud. Rosebud is a youth organizer. He's in Georgia as well, so he's on the ground. So he knows a lot about what Cliff is talking about. Rosebud always helps us know what the millennials are thinking, what's motivating them to vote. We hear a lot of, I think, misinformation and disinformation as well about millennials. Good morning, Rosebud.
Good morning, Areva. Thank you so much for having me.
So Cliff says Black men are outperforming their numbers from the last two election cycles. What are millennials doing? What are you hearing on the streets? What's motivating those young people?
Yes, and I appreciate Cliff as well, because he spoke so much truth. For the younger, I guess, portion of us that 18 to 29 or 18 to 35 age range, we're really focusing on the issues. I think that we went through our senatorial race in 2021 and the presidential race as well, and we're very in 2020, and was very excited for the change that we expected in Congress and at the state level. And so when those things didn't come, we doubled down on the issues. A lot of the local issues that we have do overlap some of the national issues that we're having, like access to abortion and protection rights, or access to education, and issues about student debt relief, you know, being a real catalyst for a lot of people my age to buy homes and to start their careers. And so we doubled down on the issues. We recently here in Georgia, we recently watched both debates for our gubernatorial race between Stacey Abrams, Mr. Hazel, and as well as our incumbent. Mm-hmm. But then we also, listen to a local election dealing with our U.S. senator, trying to make sure that we're picking the right person to represent us in the U.S. Senate. And so a lot of the information that we were looking to hear, we were really not excited to see the bickering and kind of the petty nature of politicians, but we were wide open to them really speaking about issues and exactly what they were going to do to move us forward. And so topics of economic mobility and some of those topics of abortion rights and different things came up in those discussions, but not enough was really outlined about the step-by-steps that they were going to take to get us to a place that we desire to be.
You talked about, abortion. How is the abortion issue playing with young men? We know women, we're hearing that younger women are really energized around this issue, and they are mad. They are mad about what the Supreme Court did. They're mad about what the state legislators are doing. And this cuts across political party. This isn't just Democratic women, this is independent women, as well as a lot of Republican women. And I had a woman on earlier in the week, an expert. She said that Republican women may not vote Democratic, but they may stay home because they are so upset about what's happening around abortion issues. So how is it playing with men, young men in particular, that you deal with?
Yeah. So I would say for most young people, they lack access to information to even understand what things like this, altogether mean. I think that it has direct implications about, how a young lady is unable to get an abortion at any point in her pregnancy and how that may affect her and her young life if it is that she wants to do those things. But for a young guy, there is a lot of still just missing information and kind of, I feel like some of these issues around abortion, access to abortion and those protection rights will lead into more, more, disenfranchisement more division between our rights of privacy and our rights to choose. They may also affect rights to unify and marry in some instances. And so, like, for the young men, for the guys that I work with, when the conversation comes up, we really talk about the whole environment and how it actually breaks back to us and affects our privacy, our access to contraceptives, our access to women. Georgia in general, we're one of those states where when it happened federally, we automatically we had an automatic change here.
Right.
Yeah, a trigger. And so, outside of that, our Constitution is gravely behind. Like, we just amended things about being able to show public affection between two people of color. These things aren't regularly enforced, but they definitely
still on the books.
Yeah, they were still on the books.
Let me ask you this, Rosebud. So Biden has said that if we, meaning the Democrats, hold the House and let those 2 additional senators that we need, that he's going to codify the right to abortion into federal law. He'll get a bill from the House. It'll get passed by the Senate if we pick up those 2 seats, and then he'll sign it. I would think the young men would be motivated by that. I know a lot of if you get a girl pregnant, a woman pregnant, it's not just her baby. You got some responsibility whether you live in the house or not live in the house. You got 18 years of child support. You've got 18 plus years of responsibility. So how can we get men thinking about this? This isn't just a woman's issue. You may be in a relationship with a woman and you are starting your college career. You're starting your new job. You don't want to have a baby. And together you all come to the conclusion that it's not the right time to have a baby. And you agree that the woman should have an abortion, but you're in a state like Georgia where that can't happen. So do guys understand this isn't just the woman's issue? This is his issue as well.
Yeah, I want to start by saying, too, I think that this, the strategy of Biden to kind of dangle that into our faces to help push a new Senate or rather Congress and to possibly reelect him is to his detriment, because I think we're already like, you have the space and time to really make these protections for us possibly now.
He doesn't, Rose. He can't. He doesn't have the votes. He can't get rid of the filibuster, so he doesn't have the votes to do it. That's what people have to understand. Biden, without a majority in the Senate, you are so limited as a president. So we need to make sure people understand that. We got to pick up those 2 seats. And then he said he would get rid of the filibuster on some of these important votes. But until that happens, his hands are tied.
He's stuck. Well, I'll agree with you on that part. There is limited things that you can do without having full control. But then there's also executive powers that you have to possibly make in between rims or to support that. But just, moving forward, I would say I think that young men do recognize that it is also, access to abortion or those types of protections are also a male issue. If it's not directly involving them where, like the scenario that you just explained, a young lady possibly is pregnant and we agree that this is something that we're not ready for. How do we get immediate support, in a way that is healthy, right? We're going into a regulated space, or rather actual doctor, a safe environment. So those types of things do start to come into question. Like, even if we are able to access abortion, like, what is that experience? What is that quality of service looking like? And especially when it comes to the women in our life, because as a male, and especially as a Black male, we really do care for our women, right? And so when these issues start to really affect your health or your safety, we become more concerned.
So tell us the number one issue that you're seeing that is, when you talk to folks, and we know trusted messengers matter. People are more likely to vote when they're talked to by people that they trust about voting. So what is the issue that resonates the most when you're talking to young people about why they should vote in these midterms?
A lot of it is economic development. It's access to opportunity and jobs. And some of those issues of, abortion rights, those things do too affect somebody's permanency and their ability to create a life, right?
So let me
So I
ask you this.
think,
So if you say it's economic opportunity and jobs, so in Georgia, do they see Stacey Abrams as a person that can create those kinds of opportunities for them, those kinds of economic opportunities that they feel locked out of right now?
I wouldn't say that we heard much in the debate specific to creating new jobs. I think in a roundabout way, we do believe that all of the provisions that she believes in and all the things that she's trying to create for us will spur opportunity and jobs for us. But I wouldn't say that we've had any direct understanding that those were the priorities of either governor. I think a lot of what they talk
So
about.
based on that, since you said you haven't heard that or from her, does that mean voters will stay home? These young voters are likely to say, well, I haven't heard anything I wanted to hear from either of these candidates, so I'm not going to vote at all. Or will they say, well, I haven't heard what I wanted to hear, but I think I'll vote for the black woman versus the status quo?
No, I think people are still going to come out in record numbers. I think young people are going to vote, even if it's purely off of the fact that Kemp ran with Trump, right? That essence of Trump is still here in Georgia. So this is a good old boys club, and Atlanta happens to be a black mecca where we go outside and we see people like us every day. But the wider space of Georgia is still a white space, and so. And most of our electorate, most of our elected officials are also Caucasian or they're white, and so we're really looking to eradicate this feeling of injustice. We want new blood in the office. I can't necessarily say if people are going to go for more of the independent versus Stacey Abrams, but Stacey Abrams has a long history with us. Even when she lost the election, she doubled down on her strategies to widen voter rights and to create access to mail-in ballots. They created one of the largest databases of early and mail-in locations or drop-off boxes, rather, for voting. They also do a really good job of explaining to us how we can restore our rights, right? Georgia is one of those places. It's one of 21 states that require you to finish out your probation and parole. But once those things are done, we're automatically restored. And so, and then we have, they set out campaigns to actually, educate us on those things and bring us in. So I think that she's
a lot, and people recognize that. I'm running out of time, Rose, but I got to ask you about Herschel. So
go ahead.
The bet on the part of the Republicans was that he's a football star and Georgia loves this football. So all we need to do is, put him out there, have people remember him as this great football player, and that would be enough. Is that working in Georgia? I mean, we've seen all the scandals about the babies, the abortions, the son has come out. I mean, there's been so much drama with this guy. And, he said the most insane things about climate, of just about everything. But in this last debate, people were praising him, saying, oh, Herschel, he held his own. Oh, Herschel did a good job. So, we're not in Georgia. So you're there, boots on the ground. What is the feeling about Herschel?
Yeah, did a good job because we had no expectations of Herschel. Especially in my personal opinion. And Georgia is a college city. We're the home of civil rights. We believe in community, involvement and caring for our community. And so the football players that we loved were because they went to HBCUs and they were involved in the community. And I don't think that those things stand true for Herschel's resume outside of him being a football player. What I do think is that, again, Raphael ran a really good campaign, but outside of his campaign, he was present in the community. He was working to educate people, nonpartisan, bipartisan, just about the issues and trying to encourage people to come in. And so I don't think that people are going to be subject to voting for him just because he was a football star. A lot of them, or rather a football player, a lot of them, people like that, that's all you have. And that doesn't, past your tenure on whatever team, we have no loyalty to you.
No, I am so glad to hear that. Again, all we get is the news that gets reported out to the rest of the country. But I am glad to hear that people are seeing past that football and that no one is making their assessment about who should be in the U.S. Senate making decisions about their lives based on what they did 10 years ago, as a football player. Always good to see you, Rosebud. Thank you.
so much.
Keep doing the great work that you're doing. And we're going to keep, pulling for Georgia. Two critical races happening there. And if Georgia can break through and reelect Warnock, have two Democratic senators, and elect our first Black female governor, oh my God, that would be bigger than big. So we are praying and keeping our fingers crossed that, we get that big November surprise from Georgia, and that it's a really great surprise. We'll be talking to you as we make our way to these November 8th midterms. All right, I want to thank all my guests this morning. We are going to be on this issue of what's driving voters up until that November 8th last day. In many states, voting has already started. We've heard it started in Georgia. It started in California. This early voting is the bomb. Basically, you get a ballot in the mail at your home. You fill it out. You drop it back in the mailbox. Most states, you don't even need a stamp. And you vote it. Look how easy that is. There's no reason for anyone that is registered to vote and eligible to vote to not vote. You don't have to stand in those long lines. You don't have to worry about taking time off work. You don't have to, worry about childcare or daycare. You can vote at home in the comfort of your own home. So there's no excuse to not vote, people. You have to vote. My words to live by. If you don't vote on Tuesday, don't be complaining on Wednesday. All you folks that got all these complaints about Joe Biden, you got complaints about Democrats, please make sure that you voted. And please make sure that you're checking the records of the people that you're complaining about, not just listening to the slick ads of folks who want to be in office. Joe Biden's list of accomplishments are so incredibly long. And if you got a check during the last phases of COVID, you ought to be thanking Joe Biden. I'm out. Y'all be safe out there. Remember, we're all in this together.